In many agricultural areas located near forests, wild boar herds have begun appearing with increasing frequency. They repeatedly move across open land and along the edges of fields. Each herd usually consists of 3 to nearly 10 boars following one another in the same direction before moving deeper into production areas. Residents witness the herds crossing fields before quickly scattering into different locations. Some herds return to the exact same familiar areas for many consecutive days, showing that they have established stable feeding routes and begun expanding their range into nearby regions. Not long afterward, the extent of the damage became clearly visible across large areas. Large sections of land in the middle of fields were dug up, leaving behind long trenches and disturbed soil. Numerous crop rows were trampled, and many areas became almost impossible to restore immediately afterward. What made the situation more serious was that the boars repeatedly returned to the same locations over many consecutive days. In areas near residential zones, lawns and gardens were also heavily torn up after each time the herds passed through. Production areas continued to suffer repeated destruction, while the range of damage gradually expanded into many surrounding locations. After identifying the areas most frequently used by the herds, trap systems began being deployed directly along the main movement routes. Some circular traps were installed in open areas to contain multiple animals at the same time. In addition, rectangular traps were placed along narrow pathways between open ground and crop fields. Steel frames were firmly secured to the ground to withstand strong impacts when the herds panicked. Trap doors were positioned in the direction of the boars' familiar movement routes to make entry appear more natural. After the main structures were completed, bait was placed deep inside to draw the herds fully into the controlled area. While the trap systems remained in position, survey activities continued constantly to monitor the movement patterns of the herds. Helicopters appeared above the heavily affected areas to observe from the air. From this viewpoint, the herd's movement routes gradually became visible between open land and crop areas that had been damaged many times before. The monitoring teams continued checking footprints, feeding grounds, and the paths most frequently used by the herds. Cameras and night observation equipment were positioned along different directions to accurately record the moments when the herds appeared and moved around the trap areas. During the following nights, the entire area surrounding the traps was continuously monitored using cameras and night observation devices. The first boars approached quite slowly, often stopping several times to observe before moving closer to the baited area. They circled around the edges of the traps for a short time before finally stepping inside. Once no danger was detected, the boars behind quickly followed in small groups. The number of animals inside the traps gradually increased after each wave of movement. Before long, many of them began pushing against one another while competing for food in the central area, causing their level of caution to decrease significantly over time. As soon as the right moment appeared, the entire trap system was activated immediately. The steel doors slammed shut extremely quickly and blocked every exit before the herd could react. Only seconds later, the entire area became chaotic as the trapped boars rushed in different directions trying to escape. Some slammed hard into the steel frames, but still could not break through the structures that had been firmly secured beforehand. In many situations, additional traps around the area were also activated one after another to prevent the herd from scattering in all directions. Choosing the correct moment allowed most of the herd to be contained in a single deployment. After the control operation was completed, the boars were kept stable inside the system before being transported away from the area. As the herd numbers decreased, the destructive pressure on agricultural areas gradually declined as well. Stretching across the vast fields of central Florida, where the damp soil is constantly torn up as if shaken by a silent tremor, wild boars are no longer just quiet visitors passing through the night. They appear in dense numbers, moving in organized groups, leaving behind trails of destruction that carve through the like invisible cuts. What begins as minor damage can, within just a few days, transform an entire area beyond recognition. The real concern is not the strength of individual animals, but how the entire group operates as a structured system, repetitive, precise, and increasingly unpredictable over time. In the early stages, single traps were deployed with the expectation of quickly controlling the situation. The objective was clear: remove individuals to reduce pressure. However, reality unfolded very differently. Each time one animal was captured, the rest of the group did not return as expected. Instead, they became more cautious, moved more slowly, and observe their surroundings more carefully before approaching. These small traps, rather than solving the problem, unintentionally force the entire group to upgrade its survival instincts. Recognizing the limitations of the old approach, a new strategy began to take shape, not targeting individual animals, but the entire structure of the group. Large-scale trapping systems were designed as open spaces, with steel posts forming a wide circular perimeter that was not immediately enclosed. There was no element of panic, no sudden snapshot mechanism. Everything was arranged to appear as natural as possible, blending into the environment as if it had never existed. The most critical phase is not when the trap is activated, but the period leading up to it. Bait is placed outside the area, then gradually moved deeper inside over several days. No direct human interference occurs during this process. The herd begins to approach, hesitant at first, but gradually becoming familiar. They enter and exit repeatedly, testing, retreating, then returning. Over time, the boundary between safety and danger begins to fade. Once familiarity reaches its peak, the entire group begins moving into the trap area as part of a normal routine. This is when the human element returns, but not through rushed action. The operator monitors the entire process through camera systems, waiting for a single decisive moment, when every individual is inside the controlled zone. No one remains outside. No hesitation remains. Only then is the decision made. The triggering mechanism is activated remotely, fast, precise, and decisive. A large gate closes, leaving no gap for escape. The action takes only a moment, but it is backed by days, even weeks of preparation. Trigger too early, and part of the group escapes and learns. Too late, and the opportunity may disappear entirely. This is not a race of speed, but a test of behavioral understanding. The entire process demands near total patience. There are no human traces, no direct pressure. The environment remains untouched, as if no intervention has ever occurred. It is this silence that allows the herd to return to its normal rhythm. Except this time, everything unfolds within a carefully calculated structure. When the moment arrives, a single action is enough to conclude the entire extended preparation. The result is not measured solely by the number of animals controlled, but by the complete disruption of the group's movement system. Once that structure is removed, the familiar routes disappear with it. Pressure on agricultural areas decreases significantly, not because each individual is removed, but because the collective behavior has been broken. This demonstrates that the true effectiveness of the trap lies not in its physical mechanism, but in its ability to influence the underlying behavioral system of the entire group.
No one expected a scene like this to unfold in the middle of a city. A wild boar charged straight through a glass door, the crash echoing across a residential area. Just hours later, another group appeared on the beach, running along the shoreline under bright lights and rising panic. Cameras captured them crossing roads, overturning trash bins, slipping into neighborhoods as if this place had always belonged to them. No distance left, no boundaries anymore. As the damage spread, control teams were forced to step in. In Texas, this had become a familiar scenario. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning forests and open fields, revealing the herd's movement routes. Overlapping tracks formed repeating paths, almost following a fixed rhythm each night. From above, these invisible roads began to emerge, and from them, a strategy took shape.
Check.
Instead of acting immediately, the team chose to observe. Infrared cameras were installed along key movement corridors. Each night, data was recorded with precision. The timing of the herd's arrival, how they approached food sources, and how they reacted to even the smallest environmental changes. Nothing was rushed. Every step depended on understanding behavior before intervention. When all conditions were met, the first trap was deployed. It was a smart enclosure system, blending seamlessly into the environment, with no noise or unusual signs. Bait was placed inside. On the monitor, each animal appeared, stepping in cautiously before gradually lowering its guard. When most of the herd had entered, a command was sent. The steel gate slammed shut in an instant, silently holding nearly the entire group. But not all were captured. A few individuals remained outside, retreating just in time. They watched from a distance, learned quickly, and disappeared. These few changed everything. After just one encounter, the herd's behavior began to shift. Closed structures were avoided. Even the smallest irregularities were detected. Their caution intensified, making initial methods less effective over time. Faced with this, the strategy had to evolve. Instead of small traps, the team built a large circular enclosure in an open area. No roof, no sense of confinement. Wide entry points made the structure resemble a natural feeding ground. At first, the boars lingered at the edges, but with no sign of danger, they moved deeper, more freely, gradually forming a habit of returning. The acclimation process lasted for days. No sudden interference, no signals that could trigger panic. Only when the entire herd was fully inside did the decisive moment arrive. Two large gates dropped simultaneously from opposite sides, cutting off every escape. The impact echoed as the herd surged against the barrier, but the circular design absorbed the force effectively, leaving no weak points.
Too terrible.
The final operation was carried out near a dry zone by the lakeshore, identified as a critical movement route. An even larger trap was constructed, with every parameter carefully calculated in advance. One by one, the animals entered cautiously, unaware that the entire space was already under control. And when the final gate closed, it was over. No more nights of torn ground. No more herds returning to disrupt the fragile calm. The next morning, transport began. Teams used mobile fencing combined with gentle sound cues to guide the animals in a controlled manner. No rush, no panic. Each group was loaded and transferred to designated management areas, becoming part of a long-term, sustainable control strategy. In the end, this was never a battle of strength. It was a battle of understanding.
Oh, he's a big one! Oh, it's right there. All right.
Every trap works only when it reflects how the animal thinks and reacts. And only when humans adapt faster can we truly protect crops, water sources, and the delicate balance of nature. If you want to explore more real-world control strategies like this, follow the channel and share your thoughts.
Between the snow-covered mountains of Montana, more and more grizzly bears weighing hundreds of kilograms are leaving the forests and moving dangerously close to ranches and residential areas. They tear apart food storage sheds, flip over garbage bins, and leave massive footprints right outside people's homes. Even more concerning, the bears are learning exactly where food is easiest to find and becoming harder to control after every encounter with humans. Montana has long been an ideal habitat for both black bears and grizzlies. Vast wilderness regions like Glacier National Park and Bob Marshall Wilderness have allowed bear populations to thrive for decades. With their incredible adaptability, bears can find food almost anywhere, from berries and fish to livestock feed near residential areas. That has made the boundary between the wild and human life increasingly fragile. In areas where bears repeatedly return, wildlife control teams can't simply respond to incidents one by one. Every strategy has to be planned around the animal's travel routes and level of caution. One of the most common methods is using large steel cage traps placed in locations where bears have been spotted multiple times. The goal is not only to control the animal, but also to minimize the risk to both people and the bear itself. The most important factor is not the size of the trap, but the precision of the location. Before setting a trap, control teams often spend days monitoring the bear's movement patterns, from the trails it regularly uses to the way it approaches food sources. Even a small mistake can ruin the entire operation because bears are extremely sensitive to unusual changes in their environment. Tracks in soft soil, tree trunks covered in claw marks, and overturned trash bins all become critical clues when determining where to place a trap. Trails repeatedly used over multiple nights are usually monitored the most closely. Only when the signs are clear enough is bait placed deep inside the control zone, forcing the bear to fully enter the trap instead of approaching cautiously and walking away. However, not every bear reacts the same way. Bears that have previously encountered humans or escaped earlier control operations often become extremely cautious. They can detect even the slightest changes around familiar areas and immediately avoid them. In those cases, large cage traps are no longer effective, and control teams are forced to use more discreet methods to avoid triggering suspicion. One commonly used method is a cable snare trap placed along the bear's regular travel routes. The system is carefully concealed with dirt and dry leaves, so it nearly disappears into the environment. When the bear steps into the exact position, the cable loop tightens instantly and anchors to a fixed point to limit movement. The effectiveness of this method depends heavily on field experience and the control team's ability to camouflage the setup. In the harsh conditions of Montana, bear control has never relied on luck.
Shove or not to shove? That is the question after.
From tracking signs and identifying movement corridors to choosing the right moment for deployment, every step requires patience and days of careful observation. Move too early or leave behind too much human scent, and the bear may completely change its route, making the operation far more difficult. Bear hunting also demands an extremely high level of preparation. In Montana, the use of bait is completely prohibited for ethical and ecological reasons. That forces hunters to rely on terrain, tracking skills, and a deep understanding of bear behavior instead of depending solely on equipment. Across the vast forests of Montana, the confrontation between humans and wild bears continues under constant pressure. It is not just a story about controlling dangerous animals, but also a long-standing challenge of balancing human life with the wilderness. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment and don't forget to follow for more journeys into the harsh wild landscapes of North America. As dusk slowly settles over the dense forests of North America, the environment begins to shift in a way that is almost imperceptible. During the day, everything appears calm: dirt roads, wooden fences, trash bins placed in front of porches. But as night falls, the boundary between humans and nature becomes more fragile than ever. And in that very moment, a familiar visitor quietly emerges, the black bear. In many states such as Florida, Michigan, or even some suburban areas of Canada, the presence of bears is no longer a rare occurrence. At first, the signs are subtle. An overturned trash can, a few claw marks on tree trunks, or faint footprints pressed into damp soil. But over time, these signs begin to form a repeating pattern. Bears are not wandering aimlessly. They return to the same location at the same time, as if they remember everything. What makes the situation more complex is not the size or strength of these animals, but their memory and adaptability. Once a food source is identified, a bear will not easily give it up. Trash bins, livestock feed storage, or even fruit gardens, all can become familiar stops in their nightly routes. The process of control does not begin with traps. It begins with observation. Over consecutive days, residents and wildlife management teams use infrared cameras to monitor activity. They do not just capture images of the bears, but analyze every small detail: their direction of movement, the timing of their appearances, and how they approach the area. This data gradually reveals something important. Bears do not move randomly. They follow familiar paths, avoid unusual changes, and are especially cautious of any sudden unfamiliar objects. That is why traps cannot be set hastily. Unlike conventional cage traps, bear control methods require far greater precision. Steel foothold traps, specially designed, are not placed in obvious locations. They are carefully concealed beneath dry leaves and soft soil, blending completely into the surrounding environment. Every small detail must be calculated: depth, placement, and even wind direction. Scent plays an equally critical role. Bears have an extremely sensitive sense of smell. Even the faintest trace of human scent can cause them to alter their route. Therefore, every action must be carried out with care, from wearing gloves, minimizing artificial odors, to selecting the right type of bait. Food is not placed directly on the trap, but positioned at a calculated distance, forcing the animal to step through the prepared zone. But the most crucial factor is not the trap, it is the timing. If triggered too early, the bear may escape and become even more cautious in future encounters.
Oh yeah? Tapped all the way up on that fucking thing.
If too late, the opportunity may disappear entirely.
I see you.
That is why many modern systems use remote monitoring mechanisms, allowing operators to observe and make precise decisions at the exact moment. Once the trap is activated, everything proceeds quickly but under control. The bear is handled according to strict procedures to ensure safety for both humans and the animal. There is no chaos, no rushed actions. Every step is carried out with a clear objective, minimizing conflict while maintaining natural balance. But one thing cannot be denied. If the environment remains attractive, if food is still easily accessible, the cycle will continue. Areas that have been previously visited are often improved afterward. Trash bins are reinforced, food sources are secured, and living spaces are adjusted to reduce the chances of attracting bears again. This is not an immediate solution, but a long-term strategy that requires patience and a deep understanding of animal behavior. Because in the end, this is not just a story about setting traps. It is a story about how humans learn to adapt to nature, not through strength, but through observation, calculation, and respect for the rules that existed long before we did. In Alberta, once thriving cornfields have been heavily devastated, with more than 500 acres of corn severely damaged. The sight of bears appearing before harvest season is becoming increasingly common. Deep claw marks from black bears scar tree trunks, while entire rows of corn are flattened overnight. Their incursions are so calculated that from the center of the field to its outer edges, detecting and stopping them has become nearly impossible. Not only do they destroy crops, but these bears are also becoming increasingly bold. They enter residential areas, rummage through trash bins, and even appear right at people's doorsteps, leaving residents constantly on edge and anxious. Here, farmers and wildlife control teams are struggling to reduce the pressure from the growing bear population, animals that are causing serious economic damage. Every year, hundreds of beehives are destroyed, crops are lost, and daily life is disrupted. The damage goes beyond numbers, spreading into prolonged psychological stress as residents no longer feel safe on their own land. The Alberta government has been forced to implement structured control measures, aiming to significantly reduce bear density in the area while still maintaining ecological balance. In response, control methods have gradually shifted from direct confrontation to carefully planned trapping strategies. Instead of risky close encounters, people began leveraging the bear's natural foraging behavior to lure them into preset trapping systems. To prepare an effective trap site, bait remains the key factor. A mixture of honey, grains, and fermented fruit is widely used. A sweet yet pungent scent that can travel through the air and attract bears from long distances. This mixture is placed inside culvert-style traps, solid cylindrical or metal frame structures, carefully camouflaged within the surrounding vegetation. From the bear's perspective, it is not a trap at all, but simply a familiar path leading straight to food, until the door quietly closes behind it. When the bear enters to reach the bait, the drop door mechanism is triggered, shutting behind it and containing the animal without causing immediate panic. This design takes advantage of the bear's curiosity and tendency to move forward, increasing capture success rates while ensuring operator safety. However, not every situation is suitable for culvert traps. In dense forests or more complex terrain, snare traps are deployed as a more flexible solution. Strong cable loops are set along the trails that bears frequently use, those invisible paths formed through repeated movement. These locations are identified through footprints, claw marks on trees, disturbed ground, and lingering scent. When a bear passes through, the snare tightens in a controlled manner, holding the animal in place. The anchoring system is designed to minimize injury while preventing the bear from moving too far. Whether using culvert traps or snares, the deciding factor lies in correctly reading bear behavior. These animals are highly intelligent and extremely cautious. They can detect unfamiliar scents from hundreds of meters away, and even the smallest anomaly can cause them to avoid an entire area for days. That's why trapping is not just about technique. It is a combination of observation, patience, and a deep understanding of their movement patterns. A single mistake can render the entire setup ineffective, and the bear may never return. In many cases, successful control does not come from speed, but from precise preparation. When traps are placed in the right location at the right time and aligned with the behavior of the bear population, the result is not just the capture of a single animal, it is the long-term reduction of pressure across the entire area. If you find this control journey fascinating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to explore more thrilling and unexpected wildlife stories. What would you do when facing over 90 kilograms of muscle charging wildly through the dark? For us, that's not a rare situation. It's a routine part of daily work in the Mississippi Delta. In this world, every mistake comes at a cost. Destroyed crops, damaged property, and sometimes human safety itself. We are a rapid response team specializing in wild hog control, one of the most serious ecological threats in this region. Wild hogs don't just tear through fields in a matter of hours. They collapse levees, overturn farmland, and carry a range of dangerous diseases. Our work doesn't begin with action, but with observation. Deep tracks pressed into wet soil, freshly churned mud, or scattered corn. Every detail becomes data used to map the movement patterns of an entire sounder. Our goal is not reckless action. Instead, it's calculated control, minimizing risk to people and livestock while ensuring long-term effectiveness. Two corral trap systems, each about 6 meters long, are deployed at strategic points. When driven inside, the hogs panic, slamming into the netting with full force. But instead of rigid resistance, the net is designed to flex, absorbing impact and holding them without creating a breaking point. To make that possible, preparation takes days. The first phase is conditioning. The net is suspended high on T-posts nearly 1.8 meters tall. Beneath it, dozens of kilograms of corn are spread evenly, creating a sense of safety. The hogs come to feed, repeating the behavior multiple times without encountering danger. That familiarity becomes the key to breaking their natural caution. A few days later, the system switches to capture mode. The net is lowered, everything appears unchanged, except this time, there is no escape. Still, wild hogs are not easily fooled. Infrared camera data after 1 a.m. shows the entire group lingering at the trap's edge, using their snouts to pull bait without fully stepping inside. Not a single animal crosses the boundary. This is where patience is tested. One wrong move, and the entire operation could fail. Nearly an hour passes in silence. Then the lead sow, the one guiding the group, finally steps across the edge. It enters, probes cautiously, then begins to feed. Within seconds, the others follow. In that moment, everything changes. Once the entire group is inside, the system is triggered. The net drops, enclosing the entire space. Success doesn't come from luck, but from precise understanding of their behavior. The next morning, the scene looks like a storm has just swept through. Mud is scattered everywhere, the net stretched tight under the pressure of dozens of bodies trampling and struggling to escape. The noise is relentless, chaotic, yet the structure holds. We approach in a controlled manner, using specialized catch poles with cable loops to restrain each individual. Every movement must be synchronized and precise. There is no room for error. At another site near a livestock area, the situation becomes more complicated. A section of the net is torn, a sign that an individual had escaped before. We repaired it, but the connectors weren't strong enough. With their sharp memory, the hogs can return to that exact weak point. In cases like this, there is no room for risk. A swift decision is made to eliminate the threat before it spreads. As night falls, we continue moving between trap sites. Each location tells a different story, but all revolve around one principle: understand behavior to control behavior. At the final site, the most destructive individuals are contained inside. They charge the net in desperation, but there is no escape. The work continues until the last light of dusk fades. When the operation ends, the exhaustion finally sets in. But what remains is more than just numbers brought under control. It is stability restored to an entire region. With wild hogs, strength doesn't lie in muscle, but in their ability to learn and adapt. And if the strategy isn't precise, a single mistake is enough to render every previous effort meaningless.
Let's go back to 1992, when black bears across the United States were on the brink of extinction. At the time, their numbers had dropped so dramatically that many biologists feared there would come a day when black bears would exist only in old photographs and fading memories. But the surviving bears endured and became part of one of the most remarkable wildlife recovery stories in modern history. Thanks to their incredible adaptability and resilience, black bears made a powerful comeback stronger than anyone expected. Today, the black bear population has rebounded to nearly 700,000 animals, with most living freely across the vast forests of North America. But this conservation success story has also created new challenges. As bear populations continue to grow, they are bringing increasing problems to farmers and communities living near forested areas. To deal with these issues, wildlife experts and hunting communities have worked together to find ways to balance conservation with population control. One of the oldest methods is bow hunting, a tradition deeply rooted in Native American culture. For many early tribes, hunting was never considered entertainment. It was an essential part of survival and a skill built on patience, discipline, and precision. Hunters often spend days or even weeks scouting, tracking, and preparing before ever taking a shot. Understanding bear behavior and movement patterns is the key to getting close without being detected. Black bears have an extraordinary sense of smell and can detect human scent from miles away. Because of this, hunters must remain extremely careful. Every movement has to be controlled, and every step must serve a purpose. They learn how to blend into the forest, moving silently like shadows to become nearly invisible to one of North America's most intelligent predators. When a bear finally appears, usually within only 20 to 40 yards, every sense becomes completely focused. One small mistake can ruin weeks of preparation in an instant. Meanwhile, in many mountainous and forested regions across North America, bear cage traps have become one of the most widely used methods of population control. Unlike the dangerous traps used decades ago, modern systems are designed to keep the animal secure while wildlife officers or trained specialists arrive on site. Massive steel traps are often placed deep in the woods near known bear travel areas or areas filled with claw marks, overturned rocks, and feeding signs. Inside the trap, strong-smelling bait such as fish, meat, or sweet pastries is used to attract bears from long distances away. When the massive steel door suddenly slams shut, the entire forest can erupt with deep roaring echoes. But the goal is not simply to capture a single bear. The larger objective is to prevent bears from moving into residential areas, destroying crops, or becoming a danger to nearby communities. Whether using traditional bows or modern cage trapping systems, the most important things remain calmness, responsibility, and respect for nature. Every decision affects the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. And as black bear populations continue to recover across North America, the debate over how humans should coexist with these powerful predators will likely continue for many years to come. So what do you think? Do hunting and population control still play an important role in modern wildlife management? Or should we move toward newer and more humane solutions? If you enjoy real stories about nature, survival, and the challenges people face in the wild, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective because every opinion and every story helps us better understand the fragile yet powerful connection between humans and the wild world around us.